Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show. Rob, welcome to the Principal Podcast. Happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
It is my pleasure. All right, tell us the story, Rob. What got you into consulting in the first place, and what led you to build Idealist Consulting?
Well, you got to remember, I've been doing this for 20 years. So my motivations for doing what I do have changed as I've gotten older. So I'm 55 now. You can do the math. I think I originally, and for those who know me, I got into consulting because I liked to hear the sound of my own voice. I enjoyed feeling like I was the smartest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the mental challenge that it brought. That has obviously changed a lot in 20 years. My motivations for why I've gotten into consulting have changed notably. But that was my initial draw, if I'm being honest. It was grounded in vanity. It's not something I'm proud of, but yeah, that's where it started.
So I love the authenticity here, and that is the reason for more consultants than not to get into consulting. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So 20 years, motivations change. Obviously, I have a certain respect for people who are in the same line of business for multiple decades, because at least it showcases one skill, right, which is longevity. 2026. What problem are you solving, Rob? Like, what is it that you're helping people achieve with your consulting?
Well, it's a question I have to ask myself frequently. It's a crazy time, but it's not unfamiliar. And if you look back upon Idealist Consulting's history, you can see that there have been environments that were every bit as disruptive as they are now. You could argue they're more disruptive now because of the uncertainty of AI, but it isn't that distant from the notion that we were going to take all our data and put it out into space and let the cloud handle it. And that was a big shift, and it required a lot of education, both to learn as a consultant, but also to help other people get over their fears around it and be able to develop a language that people can understand how to interpret this new technology that's getting thrown at them. And if you're on the front end of it, if you're an early adopter, if you're lucky, you'll be part of defining that language as a consulting group. You'll come up with the names and the categories and how to approach this new tech. But odds are it's going to be trying to figure out what's the language or definitions that are going to rise that you need to attach yourself to as a consulting group, and then ultimately be able to educate your clients on how to embrace the technology around that language that surfaces. And to be a little more specific, an example might be human in the loop, right? That's a term that everybody understands.
Yeah.
But human in the loop made no sense 2 years ago. Nobody knew what that meant if I were to march around and say human in the loop. And there were other terms that were out there to define that notion, but human in the loop stuck. And being a consultant is knowing and predicting which terms are going to rise and ultimately define the ecosystem that you're working in.
So is that what you're doing? You're helping other consulting firms position themselves early in the age of AI whilst keeping the human in the loop? Is that it?
No. What we're doing ultimately is helping nonprofits and humanitarian organizations be able to navigate this new experience and ultimately be able to advance their mission and their programs and enhance their fundraising and all the notions around supporting their constituents.
So, non-profits, is there a specific vertical, niche, type of non-profit that you help? Like, who is it
Well,
that you're helping
yeah,
exactly?
initially when we began, we were generalists
Hmm.
and we focused heavily on just nonprofits across the board. Could be environmental, could be education, uh, foundations, and so on. We started to get a little more specific about 10 years ago,
Okay.
and we tend to really narrow down on humanitarian organizations and environmental organizations. Those often are the ones that we really wrap our flag around. That's not to say we're not working with other organizations as well. I mean, we work with Statue of Liberty, for example, a notable organization here in the nonprofit space.
Franchise. I like that.
American Ballet Theater,
Okay.
theatrical productions, things like that. So we're not entirely those, but we do focus our energies in that environmental and humanitarian space. And that was born of my experience in Peace Corps and Red Cross in the founding years of Idealist.
Why the focus on non-profits? Why not just rolling that out to private, public companies, for-profits, institutions? Why the focus on non-profits?
Well, there are two things that sort of stick out. I've been asked that question before, as you can imagine. And one was there's a line, I can't remember what movie it's from, but money is easy to make if all you want to do is make money. And while I'm not sure that's entirely true, I understand the premise of it. And it can, when you're focused exclusively on making money, it can feel a bit empty. And that's not to say that it's not a pursuit worth focusing on, but I wanted to build a company that left a positive wake in its efforts. So I was joking earlier in the show here about how vanity was an inspiration for me to become a consultant. I don't necessarily think that while the inspiration may seem shallow, that the outcomes have to be. So working with nonprofits was really to work with organizations that were making the world a better place, and it helps me get up in the morning.
Huh, a little bit of a, so I love this. Very mission driven. I appreciate that. But I feel we can play a bit, Rob. So I'm gonna throw a curveball at you. Don't you think that certain institutions make the world a better place? They just use as a vehicle a for-profit framework. Like, don't you think that certain? I'm thinking, for instance, example, right? So the person I consider my mentor, Alex Hormozy, very much for profit. But Tony Robbins, right, to mention one that is much more renowned. I believe his main business is not non for profits, but at the same time, he's influencing the lives of, dare I say, millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think if I understand the premise of your comment, it's not a huge distance from where Idealist started from. So the
Right.
idea, a lot of people think that the name Idealist Consulting was designed to be idealists that are consulting. And that was not actually the impetus of the name. The name was that we were going to consult idealists. And idealists generally don't come packaged with a very clear business acumen. And the premise of Idealist Consulting, at least 20 years ago, and I still think it is today, even when you look at some of the work we're doing with Anthropic, it's to get private sector technology into the hands of nonprofits so that they can operate their missions with the same kind of efficiencies as the private sector. And then ultimately, yes, make money for their mission. So there is a
I
component
like
of
that.
where these two things sort of collide, and trying to make money in the name of a mission, I think is admirable. And that's something that we're trying to help facilitate.
Amen to that. So how do you get in front of those non-for-profits? Actually, one question before that. Who's the decision maker that makes the decision of hiring you, Rob? Who do you need to get into a room with to be like, hey, you have this non-profit here, non-for-profit, I can help. Who do you need to talk to?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm going to have to answer that sort of in a long journey. So I'll try to make it succinct. But when Idealist started, the notion of cloud computing, for example, was really new. And I like to say a lot of people think we were the early bird. I think it's more accurate to say we were the early worm. So when you arrive early, you gain benefits. Some of those benefits are you're out front, you get to label yourself innovator, you get noticed first. But the disadvantage is you have to survive long enough for the market to catch up with you. So oftentimes you're either too early or you're too late. And in the case of Idealist Consulting, I think I could make a case for us being a little too early. It costs money to wait for an industry to catch up. Now answering your question, being here early in the industry, and I would say we were probably about 5 years too early.
Okay.
We were able to earn a brand for ourselves while we were evangelizing, and folks know us as a result. And they will reach out to us. Oftentimes the name may sound familiar, but they may not know us directly. So I think that's one way where we're found. The other way is we do a lot of conferences. Obviously, we make efforts to do some of our own engagements as well. Those are tough because they cost money. They're more direct expenditure and they require a lot of promotion.
So what do you mean with that, Rob? What do you mean with own engagements?
Well, I think a lot of folks will go to conferences and they try to find a conference that works for them. Yeah. And that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to create an event that is around what you're trying to sell. I'll give you a quick example. We have a party we do every year called the Engagement Party. And the Engagement Party draws as many as 700 plus RSVPs to the party. It's usually a pretty big bash. Everybody shows up. And fundamentally, the notion behind that is to invite people into the community of nonprofit tech, have them all hang out, have drinks, have food, dance, have a good time, and network. And that's an example. Now, that doesn't come without a cost. And our partners, we partner with folks to promote that party. So they do sponsorships around that party, but we have to organize all that. And that requires a team in order to facilitate that.
Now I'm feeling like a bit of an itch to come to one of those parties.
Yeah, it's a good party.
Is there a dress code such as white shirt?
You got to wear a shirt. You got to wear a shirt. You got to wear pants. After that,
okay.
It's pretty loose. It does. The dress code does tend to change as the night goes on.
As the party goes on.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I didn't hear anything about shoes, which means if you have a certain thing for feet.
I don't think shoes are. Yeah, I'm not sure you need. I don't think you need to have shoes if you don't want them.
Fair enough. Let's explore that further. Maybe in another podcast episode. So brands, conferences, organizing your own events. So I love this, and I guess you're trying to get in front of the managing partners. I'm not even sure of the titles within non-for-profit. So who is it that you're like, in order to be like, hey, Idealist Consulting is going to help you guys, who do you need to talk to? Rob, can you remind me?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different places, but ideally we're trying to talk to the CTO. That's usually where the conversation starts. Those are the primary influencers of the tech stack, and they have a lot of influence. But in all fairness, it doesn't have to be the CTO. Figuring out who is the champion or the influencer of the tech budget can vary from organization to organization. Sometimes it's a volunteer. It really depends, but primarily the CTO is usually holding the keys on making the big decisions and influencing folks. And believe it or not, usually somebody in accounting has some level of influence on this, because accounting is one of the hardest elements of a tech stack to adjust. And they often most tech stacks are built out from the accounting process.
So that makes a lot of sense. Not the easiest profiles to get to a party on top of that. What I'm a bit curious before we move on with marketing and sales is, when you're early, how do you build that brand? Because I think about how you presented your arrival in the market and being 5 years early. And it's all a question of can you survive until people realize that this was the thing to do from the get-go, which I'm sure lots of consultants will be able to relate. But when you think about certain technologies, certain processes, certain ways of doing things, this definitely applies. So when you're there and you've done it successfully, how do you survive long enough? Obviously, you find some clients who are willing to pay, but how do you build that brand in the meantime? So slowly but surely you become the name that comes out when we're thinking about cloud computing for nonprofits back in 2005. Yeah. How did you do that?
I've got to look back and sort of as a third person at myself back then. You got to be a little bit ignorant over the market, because had I known what I know now, I don't know if I would have been able to put in the energy necessary for me to be able to stick it out long enough for the brand to actually make it. I mean, I was younger, so I had a lot more energy. But fundamentally, association with channel partners was a huge component. And I'll just give you some examples. So, and they're not going to sound believable when I share them with you, but they are. When I started, I began engagement with Ring Central. We were one of their first 100 clients. We were one of the first Google Business deployment, email suite, that whole thing. In fact, we held on to the intro Google suite for probably almost a decade before they came and said, okay, guys, you got to switch off this old system. Maybe you've heard of them, Salesforce.com. We were one of the first 4 SIs, deployment partners, to work with Salesforce. B Corporation, another one. We were one of the first 150 B Corps in the world. So I think looking around for good channel partners is a key component to longevity and perseverance. Trying to do it alone and just knocking on doors is a lot of work. And the only way you can really sort of amplify your voice is to align yourself with channel partners. And if you're lucky, you're going to find a channel partner on the rise, like Salesforce, for example. We also are one of the only 4 social impact partners for Anthropic, for Claude. So this is also we were able to get in at that ground floor and get recognized, and we were at the right place at the right time for those channel partners.
Tie this all to revenue, Rob. So how do you go from brands, being early, conferences, the party that gets less and less clothes on as the party goes on, channel partners, to a conversation, a sales conversation, an SOW, a letter of engagement, we rock and roll? How do you think about sales motion, especially in the non-for-profit world? How do you make that happen?
You know, there's really two clear lanes to revenue that one of them wasn't really available to me back in the founding of the company. The first lane is a traditional lane where you just work and you get a lead, you get some money, you close the deal, you get some money, you put some in your pocket, you spend some on the business, and you grow dollar by dollar, deal by deal. That's how Idealist grew. We don't have any investment. We didn't build it off anybody else's money except the money we were able to earn and save. There is another lane, and that's to go and get investors.
Yeah.
And be able to build out a brand and something and be able to sell yourself very effectively, even before you produce any sort of profitability. It's a very different lane, and it requires a very different approach. The approach I'm talking about is the brick by brick model. So in the beginning, you're selling into, you start with a broad net. I was selling just about anything that I felt was tech related. I mean, I was setting up networks. It wasn't just SaaS. And over time, I'd say over the course of about 2 years, it narrowed to software as a service, which at the time was blooming. And it made sense. It made sense to not do network development and move into SaaS. But that was also because we had found those channel partners. Being able to go into a sales deal aligned with channel partners gives you a boost that you wouldn't otherwise have by yourself.
Yeah.
And even if they don't even know who the partners are, it looks as it's an endorsement. The other thing that I think is really essential, and it's ironic because we're talking about this at the company right now, is testimonials. So your work, your first few projects, you are not going to make money. And the best thing to do is to look at that loss as an investment in marketing opportunity. So you are trying to build a referral, and that's all you're trying to do. And if you don't want to do it for free, you don't want to do it for free. People make that mistake all the time. You want to do it for some type of value exchange, and likely financial. And then you do it at a deep discount, and you work your tail off, and you make sure that you get a good referral out of it. And ultimately, I would say our first few deals, that's how we built the practice. And then once we got those referrals and testimonials, people were appreciative of our work. They were able to speak to other prospects, and we were able to grow accordingly.
So I want to pause here because this is really good. And I think a lot of high ticket professional service firm owners, chief marketing officers, and so on still struggle a lot with that referral, that testimonial, that case study. So first of all, I love how you framed it. So that's when you start, right? I'm also interested into how you do it on a rolling basis when you have an established firm, but you don't have lots of proof to show out there. And when we think about where we are right now, 2026, AI is everywhere. Anybody can claim anything on the internet. Testimonials, proof, case studies, huge in terms of like making the sales motion easier, getting some marketing materials out there. So how do you get those, Rob? Like, can you walk us through tactically how you get a client happy, ideally, to give you a testimonial, give you that vote of confidence, basically, that you can show in the world? How do you go about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, consulting's tough. People come in with their own expectations, their own ideas of what success are, what it could be. I had a colleague who I'm still friends with. She had ran our services department for some time, and she'd like to say, we're not in the tech business, we're in the people business. And I always thought that was an interesting comment, because what it implies is that it's not necessarily that the technology has to work, and I'm throwing air quotes up, but the client has to be happy with the outcome.
Yeah.
And there are so many different outcomes in that can be defined as successful or as failures. Getting alignment with the client and prospect is essential for that. And I know that sounds obvious, but when I say alignment, I'm talking about expectation setting. And that means having clear conversations about what the outcome, what their goals are, what they want to achieve, and then ultimately, can you meet those? And if you can't, then you need to share that with them. You need to educate them on the fact that you can't, and here's why. And having the conversations that are educational, not always well received, like the notion of better, faster, cheaper. You get to pick two. You don't get all three. And that's a fundamental story that needs to get out there anytime you enter into a consulting firm. Now, the challenge with that is you've got 10 other consulting groups that are saying you can do it better, faster, cheaper. And you're going to lose deals when you have those conversations.
Oh,
but having those conversations, those expectation setting conversations early on and frequently. And when I say frequently, we have a client success program that's a non-billable resource that walks with you during the project. And some of our projects go over a course of years, and they are constantly doing expectation setting education throughout the project deployment. And then I would add, our contracts are in alignment with that expectation setting. So our contracts speak to those things specifically. Now, that all being said, that speaks to your question, but it also is a risk, because when you show up like that, two things occur. One, I've already mentioned, you've got other people telling you they can do as much or more with less. And the other thing that it does is it slows the sales cycle, which, as we all know, time kills all deals. So this can also be a struggle, but I think it's one of the reasons why Idealist Consulting has been able to hold its brand through 20 years. And, I hope another 20 years to come.
Okay, there are so many things I want to follow up on here, but so little time to do so. So one, absolutely love this. Two, it will be harder, but I believe in the long run, this is the difference between winners and, I need to pronounce it better. I know my French accent is getting in the way of this. Winner. Is that right?
Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to be real careful.
The people who are victorious and the ones who are not, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
And three, back to the point around proof, right? Because the best way you can showcase that, hey, yes, I'm probably not going to be cheaper than this consulting firm that says that they can do it for cheaper, better, faster. Or yes, you're not going to get the results as fast as this other consulting firm claims, but here is the proof that I can do it within that time, with that approach and that budget. Absolutely love this, Rob. I love your style, and not only clothing. I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball question at you now. What is your number one challenge right now with Idealist Consulting? Like, what is the one that you guys are trying to crack that once you crack, you're going to take it even to the next level?
Well,
what would that be for you?
It's not going to be a new story. I mean, what's happening in the space is a disruption of an entire ecosystem, right? I mean, we are entering into a world that is leaning heavily into AI and all that, and everything that it means. And it gets back to what I was talking about earlier. It's finding that consultative language, that consultative method that is ultimately of value, that is big enough and worthwhile enough where somebody's ready to pay you for it. because that's ultimately consulting, right? I mean, you've got to be able to bring enough value for somebody to say, yeah, that's worth me paying money for it. And right now you can see in the space, you can see everyone's sort of clamoring to find that language. They're trying to find what is the story. And I think in addition to that, there are a lot of solutions that are trying to figure out how they fit in the world. Pricing is changing.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at PetSmart the other day and they're trying to sell me on their version of a managed service, right? And they want to get me in $10 a month.
Of course.
They're trying to figure out, give me value propositions. And this is the world we're in, right? We're moving away from a time and materials engagement, although there's still place for that. I don't want to say that's disappearing, but we are moving towards a managed service, not just in consultative, but everywhere.
Yeah.
And you're essentially going to be having lease agreements with everything that you do. And how do you establish those lease agreements and how do those get set up? And I have a suspicion this is going to be about another year and a half, maybe 2, before the dust settles enough where we start to find a rhythm. The key component here is figuring out how AI is going to ultimately charge. Mm-hmm. And we know it's going to be around tokens. And we have to figure out how much those token values are going to be at the end of the day.
Rob Jordan, ladies and gentlemen. Rob, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Well, if they want to find out about me, come visit me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty approachable there. And then obviously you can check us out at idealistconsulting.com. We're about ready to launch an AI version of our website, which should be kind of exciting. I'm looking forward to that. Some neat stuff there. But outside of that, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
We should call first next time so we're not wearing the same shirt.
It's a happy
risk you take in the world you're in, though, right?
Exactly. Happy occurrence. What's funny is I started, so as the podcast has grown and obviously we get bigger and bigger and better profiles. I love my first guest. I love the guests that I have now. I recently only decided that I needed to start wearing shirts during the recording. So it's very recent, Rob. So you're catching me at a time where apparently we have the same stylist. But what can I say?
I do, and don't take this the wrong way, but I do think I wear it better than you. Pretty sure.
Well, I mean, I liked our interview a lot. I think you're right on many topics, but it seems not all of them. But what can I say? It happens as well.
Hey, I think it'd be fun to be on the show again. So if you have an opportunity, you've got some blank space in there, give me a call.
I would love that. Rob, we'll put all the links in the description. I can say one thing for sure is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview. Me, I've just added you.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for coming on the Principal Podcast.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time. How